In a world where the search for truth and spiritual understanding is increasingly relevant, a troubling question arises. What are the laws that govern our existence beyond the tangible? In The Dark Law That the Awakened Must Never Break, we explore an intriguing concept from Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist and philosopher, who invites us to reflect on the profound forces that influence our psyche. Jung suggests that there is a delicate balance between knowledge and ignorance, between light and darkness, and that those who have awakened to a new consciousness must navigate carefully to avoid infringing upon this fundamental law. In this video, we will unveil the implications of this dark law, examining how it may affect our quest for authenticity and connection with our inner being. Join us on this revealing journey as we uncover hidden truths that can transform our understanding of the world and ourselves. Psychic awakening, according to Carl Jung, is not merely an intellectual process, but a profound transformation of the self. It involves a direct connection with the unconscious and its mysteries, a journey into unknown territories within oneself. When embarking on this path, the individual faces a rupture with the ordinary perception of reality and begins to interact with what Jung called the collective unconscious, a deep layer of the human psyche that contains universal archetypes. For Jung, this process of awakening, known as individuation, is a journey toward wholeness. It is not just about achieving greater awareness, but about integrating all parts of oneself, including those that have been repressed or ignored. This means confronting the shadow, that dark aspect of our psyche we prefer to keep hidden. As one delves into the unconscious, the person encounters powerful symbols, such as dreams and visions, that reveal deep truths about their life and the world. These symbols are not mere images, but manifestations of archetypal forces that shape our existence, both guiding and challenging us. The process of awakening is neither linear nor predictable. As a person explores their unconscious, they begin to perceive the symbolic nature of their life. Dreams become more intense, meaningful coincidences arise, and deeper emotions surface. This can be overwhelming, as the person encounters parts of themselves they had not recognized. According to Jung, it is at this point that many people hesitate, unable to continue due to fear of what they might find. One of the greatest challenges of awakening is the temptation to stop at the first revelations. The process may seem complete when one begins to understand certain aspects of their life through the symbols of the unconscious. But Jung warns that this is only the beginning. True awakening involves continuous transformation and constant confrontation with new layers of the psyche. Every step forward reveals new aspects of oneself, and it is crucial to keep moving without getting stuck in the early stages of the process. In this sense, psychic awakening is an endless cycle of discovery, acceptance, and integration. Each phase of the journey takes the individual deeper into their psyche, and each revelation brings with it new responsibilities. As more is discovered about oneself, there is also a growing need to live more authentically, aligned with the unconscious. Resistance to this process can lead to suffering, but acceptance brings a greater sense of wholeness and purpose. In short, awakening is a journey toward integrating all aspects of oneself, both conscious and unconscious. The collective unconscious is one of the most fundamental concepts in Jung's psychology. It is not merely a repository of personal experiences, but a psychic structure shared by all humanity, composed of images and symbols that have existed throughout history. These archetypes, such as the hero, the mother, and the sage, among others, influence our daily lives, whether we are aware of it or not. Ignoring the power of the collective unconscious is one of the greatest dangers in the process of awakening. When a person comes into contact with the collective unconscious through dreams or visions, they are confronted with forces beyond their conscious understanding. These archetypes are extremely powerful and can destabilize a person if not handled with respect. Jung warned that one of the most common pitfalls is becoming overly identified with these archetypes, a phenomenon he called psychic inflation. This occurs when a person in the process of awakening begins to believe they are a hero, a savior, or an enlightened being, rather than seeing the archetypes as guides in their process of individuation. They interpret these symbols as confirmation of their personal greatness. This psychic inflation is particularly dangerous because it disconnects the individual from their humanity. Jung observed that those who fall into this trap begin to see others as inferior or unawakened, which can lead to deep alienation and isolation. By losing connection with their own human self, the person becomes a vessel for the projections of the archetypes, which can lead to ego fragmentation and, in extreme cases, psychosis. To avoid this danger, Jung emphasized the importance of humility and moderation. The collective unconscious is vast and filled with powerful forces that must be approached cautiously. The individual must be aware that they cannot control or dominate these archetypes, but must learn to live with them, integrating them healthily into their conscious life. Jung warned that the process of awakening is not a race for power or enlightenment, but a journey toward wholeness, where every step must be taken with respect and attention. Another danger of ignoring the collective unconscious is that if its influence is not recognized, these forces may manifest destructively. Jung observed that many psychological crises people experience in their daily lives, such as anxiety, depression, or personality disorders, result from a disconnection from the collective unconscious. When archetypal forces are not consciously integrated, they find other ways to manifest, often through physical or psychological symptoms that seem to have no apparent cause. Projection is a fundamental psychic mechanism that Jung described as the tendency of individuals to see in others what they cannot accept in themselves. It is an unconscious phenomenon that occurs when repressed aspects of the personality, especially those that are part of the shadow, are projected onto the external world. Instead of confronting our own weaknesses, defects, or fears, we see them reflected in others. This mechanism is one of the main obstacles in the process of awakening. In the context of psychic awakening, projection can take more subtle but equally destructive forms. Those who have begun to explore the depths of their unconscious may project their own internal conflicts onto other people, relationships, or even global situations. For example, someone who is in the process of awakening may start to see others as asleep or unenlightened when, in reality, they are projecting their own unresolved fears and doubts. One of the most common manifestations of projection in the awakening process is the belief that the external world is responsible for our internal difficulties. Jung observed that many people undergoing self-discovery tend to blame their environment, circumstances, or the people in their lives for the challenges they face, rather than taking responsibility for their own internal conflicts. This is a way of avoiding the harder work of individuation, which requires confronting and accepting those aspects of ourselves that we have been avoiding. The challenge, according to Jung, is to learn to withdraw projections and confront the parts of ourselves we have rejected. This involves deep introspective work, where a person confronts their fears, insecurities, and flaws head-on. By withdrawing projections, the individual can begin to see the world as it truly is, without the distortions created by their own unconscious. This not only improves the quality of their relationships, but also facilitates greater personal and spiritual growth. However, withdrawing projections is neither an easy nor a quick process. It requires a continuous commitment to self-awareness and honesty. Jung emphasized that the first step in withdrawing a projection is recognizing that it exists. Many people are unaware of their projections and therefore cannot correct them. Only by developing greater self-awareness can they begin to see how their internal conflicts are being reflected in the external world. Another important aspect of projection is that it does not occur only on an individual level, but also on a collective one. Jung observed that many societal tensions and conflicts are the result of mass projections by entire groups of people. In times of crisis, societies tend to project their fears and insecurities onto external groups, leading to the creation of scapegoats and imagined enemies. This phenomenon is particularly dangerous as it can lead to violence and dehumanization. According to Jung, the process of withdrawing these collective projections is as crucial as individual work, as it is the only way to achieve true peace and understanding between people. Synchronicity is one of the most enigmatic and fascinating concepts Carl Jung introduced in his depth psychology. Defined as the meaningful coincidence of two or more events where something more than random chance is involved, synchronicity represents a principle of connection between the psyche and the inner world that challenges traditional explanations based on causality. For the awakened, or those who have begun exploring the deep territories of the unconscious, synchronicity becomes a sign that they are on the right path. However, Jung warned that although this phenomenon is fascinating, it should be approached with caution. Synchronicities often appear during critical moments of personal transformation, such as births, deaths, existential crises, or periods of great inner change. For Jung, the human mind in certain states of consciousness is more connected to the flow of external events than we think. Synchronicity reflects this interconnection between the internal and external, where symbolic events in a person's life seemingly align magically with their external reality. However, Jung cautioned that these moments of coincidence are not merely random, nor should they be interpreted as signs of fate. They represent a continuous dialogue between the psyche and the universe. In his therapeutic practice, Jung observed how synchronicities helped his patients advance in their individuation process. A famous example is the case of the golden scarab, where a very rational patient repeatedly dreamed of a golden scarab. During a session, as she recounted her dream, a golden insect struck the window of the consultation room, enabling a significant breakthrough in her therapy. This event, which had no direct causal explanation, symbolized for Jung the interaction between the patient's unconscious and the external world, revealing a truth that needed to be seen. However, Jung warned against the literal or superstitious interpretation of synchronicity. For those in the process of awakening, the temptation to interpret every small coincidence as a divine sign is strong and can lead to a kind of spiritual paranoia. Rather than viewing synchronicity as merely an external message, Jung suggested that these coincidences should be seen as opportunities to reflect on one's internal state. Instead of focusing exclusively on the external event, synchronicity invites people to look within themselves to discover how the event resonates with their psychic life. The danger of obsessing over synchronicity is that it can lead to a state of psychic imbalance, where a person deviates from their internal process by constantly seeking signs and symbols in the external world. Jung acknowledged that synchronicity is a powerful tool for those in the process of awakening, but he also emphasized that it should not become a distraction. The goal of awakening is not simply to find coincidences in the world, but to understand how these events reflect the individual's inner state and how they can contribute to the process of individuation. One of the most important moments in the awakening journey, according to Carl Jung, is what he called the descent into the shadow. The shadow represents those aspects of our personality that we have repressed, ignored, or find uncomfortable. For Jung, psychic awakening is not just a journey toward light and consciousness, but also a process of integrating darkness. In this sense, descending into the shadow is a crucial step in avoiding the dangers of psychic imbalance. The shadow contains all the qualities we do not want to admit to ourselves. These can be aggressive impulses, repressed desires, insecurities, or even undeveloped capacities that we have denied out of fear or shame. When we confront the shadow, we begin to see ourselves more completely and honestly, and it is at this point that the real work of awakening becomes difficult but necessary. This process is an act of deep humility, as it involves recognizing that we are not just beings of light, but that we also harbor darkness within us. The retreat into the shadow is, according to Jung, a moment of confrontation with oneself. Many people fear this process because it forces them to face their own inner demons. However, Jung believed that without this integration, awakening is incomplete. Those who try to ignore or avoid their shadow run the risk of it manifesting destructively in their daily lives. The repressed shadow can appear as irrational behaviors, psychosomatic illnesses, or even through toxic relationships where we project our unaccepted aspects onto others. Working with the shadow is not easy, but it is necessary to achieve true individuation. For Jung, integrating the shadow means accepting that we are complex beings and that our light cannot exist without our darkness. Rather than rejecting the shadow, we must learn to dialogue with it, understand its messages, and allow it to become part of our conscious being. This integration not only frees us from constantly projecting our flaws onto the external world, but also enables us to live more authentically and in greater balance. One of the greatest challenges in descending into the shadow is the temptation to reject what we find there. The ego, always striving to maintain its image of perfection, often resists accepting the darker aspects of the psyche. However, Jung emphasized that only through the acceptance and understanding of the shadow can we truly free ourselves from its effects. Resistance to this process only strengthens the shadow, making its manifestations in conscious life more difficult to manage. Humility is the key to this process. Jung warned that those who resist facing their shadow often fall into the trap of spiritual ego, believing they are above the darker aspects of their psyche. This is a real danger for the awakened, as pride can lead to stagnation in their psychic development. True wisdom, according to Jung, lies in the ability to accept both light and darkness within oneself, and to understand that both are necessary for wholeness. One of the greatest dangers in the awakening process is what Carl Jung called the spiritual ego. This phenomenon occurs when a person, after experiencing a certain level of awakening, begins to overly identify with their spirituality or their elevated state of consciousness. Instead of seeing awakening as a continuous process filled with challenges, the spiritual ego creates an illusion of superiority, where the person perceives themselves as more advanced or enlightened than others. The spiritual ego is an insidious trap because it disguises itself as wisdom and self-knowledge. Those caught in this trap often believe they have transcended the challenges of the ordinary ego, but in reality, they have merely transferred their sense of personal importance to a new realm, the spiritual. This can lead to disconnection from others, as the person begins to view those who haven't awakened as inferior or less conscious. Rather than cultivating compassion and humility, the spiritual ego fosters separation and a sense of superiority, which goes against the true spirit of awakening. This phenomenon can manifest in several ways. One of the most common is the development of a judgmental attitude toward others. Those who have fallen into the trap of the spiritual ego often see themselves as guardians of a higher truth and begin to judge those who do not share their beliefs or practices. Jung observed that this attitude is particularly dangerous because it can lead to social and emotional isolation, where the person loses the ability to relate authentically to others. Another manifestation of the spiritual ego is the denial of the shadow. Those who believe they have reached an elevated state of consciousness often fall into the temptation of denying their own flaws and limitations. They believe that awakening has made them immune to human weaknesses, which can lead to a lack of self-criticism and blindness to the darker aspects of their psyche. According to Jung, this is one of the greatest dangers of the spiritual ego, as denying the shadow only strengthens its unconscious influence. The antidote to the spiritual ego, according to Jung, is humility. True awakening is not a state of perfection nor a final goal, but a continuous process of self-knowledge and transformation. Those who have experienced awakening must always be willing to question themselves, confront their limitations, and continue learning. Jung believed that real wisdom does not lie in the belief that one has reached a superior state, but in the ability to accept that the journey never ends. In conclusion, the spiritual ego is one of the subtlest dangers of the awakening process. Although it may seem that one has overcome the challenges of the ordinary ego, this new type of ego is equally destructive. To avoid falling into this trap, it is essential to cultivate an attitude of humility and self-criticism, recognizing that awakening is a continuous journey full of challenges. Only through this attitude can we continue moving toward greater integration and authenticity. Duality is one of the fundamental principles Carl Jung emphasized in his work. For Jung, the human psyche is composed of opposing forces, and the process of individuation or awakening consists of integrating these forces rather than trying to eliminate or ignore one in favor of the other. Light and darkness, consciousness and the unconscious, good and evil, are pairs of opposites that cannot exist separately. They are two sides of the same coin. Attempting to live solely in one extreme of this duality is to break a natural law of the psyche. Jung observed that many people in search of spiritual awakening tend to reject their dark side or focus only on the positive aspects of their personality, believing that spiritual growth means eliminating everything negative. However, this attitude is not only unrealistic, but also dangerous. Jung believed that rejecting one of the poles of duality creates severe imbalances in the psyche, as what is repressed always seeks to manifest, often in destructive ways. The true task of awakening, according to Jung, is not to overcome duality, but to learn to live with it, recognizing that both light and darkness are equally necessary for a healthy psychic life. In the mythology and symbolism of various cultures, this duality appears as a constant. Gods have both benevolent and destructive qualities. Heroes face their internal shadow, and the universe itself is composed of creative and destructive forces. These myths reflect a deep truth about the human psyche. We cannot be only light, nor can we be only shadow. Both aspects must be recognized and integrated. Jung described this process as the reconciliation of opposites, and he affirmed that without this integration, the individual risks falling into fanaticism, moral rigidity, or depression. For example, a person who tries to live solely in the light, denying their shadow, can become moralistic and judgmental, projecting their dark aspects onto others. This type of behavior is not only harmful to their interpersonal relationships, but also hinders their own growth. The denied shadow still exists, but because it is not recognized, it is projected onto the external world. The process of integrating opposites, as Jung explained, first requires recognizing the existence of duality within oneself. This involves accepting that we all have contradictory impulses, desires that shame us, and aspects of our personality that we would prefer to ignore. The next step is learning to live with this contradiction without trying to eliminate it. For Jung, balance does not mean suppressing darkness in favor of light, but finding a way to harmoniously integrate both. The integration of opposites is a task that never ends. Throughout life, new contradictions and challenges will arise, and the individual must be willing to face them again and again. Jung described this process as a spiral. Each time a contradiction is resolved, the person moves to a deeper level of self-knowledge, but there will always be new dualities to confront. This is the cycle of individuation, which has no definite end, but is a continuous process of growth and transformation. One of the great risks of ignoring this law of duality is ego inflation. Jung observed that people who try to live only in the light or in a state of spiritual perfection tend to develop an inflated ego, believing themselves to be superior to others. This is one of the most pernicious effects of rejecting the shadow, as the inflated ego leads to disconnection from reality and from other people. Believing themselves to be enlightened or morally superior, these individuals lose the ability to empathize with others and, worse, disconnect from their own process of growth. In his therapeutic practice, Jung helped his patients confront the duality within themselves, guiding them through the process of accepting both their luminous and dark impulses. This was often achieved through the analysis of dreams, where the archetypes of light and shadow appeared as powerful symbols revealing the patient's internal tensions. Dreams for Jung were a gateway to the unconscious and a way to work with duality in a symbolic manner. In conclusion, the law of duality is one of the most fundamental in the awakening process, and those who attempt to ignore it run the risk of living an unbalanced and fragmented life. Jung taught us that true wisdom does not lie in seeking perfection or denying darkness, but in learning to accept and live with both aspects of our nature. Only by integrating duality can we achieve a deeper sense of wholeness and authenticity. One of the greatest and least discussed dangers in the process of awakening is material desires. Although spiritual awakening is commonly understood as a process of inner growth, there can be a persistent temptation to translate that progress into terms of external success, whether in the form of wealth, status, or recognition. For Carl Jung, this is a dangerous diversion that can lead to the corruption of the true purpose of awakening, the integration of the psyche, and the pursuit of wholeness. Jung observed that many people who begin to awaken spiritually feel drawn to the material or social benefits they believe should accompany their inner growth. This temptation is natural, as we live in a world where external success is highly valued, and recognition and tangible rewards are seen as indicators of achievement. However, Jung warned that in pursuing these desires, people can lose sight of the central purpose of their journey, self-knowledge, and the integration of their conscious and unconscious aspects. The danger of material desires is that they can divert a person from their true quest. Instead of focusing on inner work, on confronting the shadow, and on integrating opposites, the individual may channel their energy into acquiring power, money, or fame. This diversion not only slows the process of individuation, but can also lead to a fragmentation of the psyche. Jung observed that the desire for material success is often based on an unconscious need for validation, and those who seek to fill this external void tend to neglect their deeper internal needs. This phenomenon is particularly evident in what we might call commercialized spirituality, where personal growth and enlightenment are seen as commodities that can be bought and sold. Instead of a serious commitment to psychic work, many people seek quick solutions that promise material prosperity or professional success as a result of their awakening. Jung warned that this type of superficial approach is dangerous because it feeds the ego and reinforces the disconnection between the inner and outer worlds. Another important aspect that Jung highlighted is how material desires can be linked to ego inflation. As a person progresses on their spiritual path, they may begin to feel that they deserve the rewards of external success as proof of their growth. This not only strengthens the ego, but can also lead to a sense of superiority or a separation from others. Jung observed that this is a common risk among those who have experienced some form of awakening, confusing spiritual growth with material success, believing that one validates the other. To avoid falling into this trap, Jung emphasized the importance of humility and inner focus. Spiritual awakening is not about accumulating wealth or power, but about achieving a greater level of self-understanding and authenticity. This involves letting go of external expectations and focusing on the more difficult and less glamorous work of psychic integration. True growth, according to Jung, is measured not by what one possesses, but by the ability to live in harmony with oneself and the unconscious. In conclusion, material desires represent a real danger for those in the process of awakening, as they can divert a person from their true path and strengthen the ego. Jung believed that only by renouncing these desires and committing to inner work can a person reach a state of wholeness and authenticity. True awakening is not about what one gains in the external world, but about what one discovers and accepts in their own inner world. Carl Jung considered psychic balance to be a fundamental law in the awakening process. In his view, the human psyche operates similarly to an energy system. When energy flows properly between the various parts of the self, consciousness, the unconscious, emotions and thoughts, well-being is experienced. However, when one of these aspects consumes too much energy, the entire system becomes unbalanced, which can manifest in a wide range of psychological problems, from anxiety to depression or even existential crises. Psychic balance is vital because the psyche is composed of multiple forces and aspects, such as the shadow, the ego, the self, and the archetypes of the collective unconscious. Each of these aspects has a role to play in a person's life. However, when one of them becomes dominant, for example, when the ego becomes too strong and begins to absorb all the psychic energy, the psyche reacts with compensation. Jung argued that this compensation could manifest through disturbing dreams, psychosomatic illnesses, or personal crises as a way for the unconscious to attempt to restore balance. In everyday life, this imbalance manifests as obsessions or compulsive behaviors. A person who focuses all their energy on their career, for example, may experience stress, insomnia, or feelings of emptiness because they have neglected other areas of their life, such as personal relationships or emotional well-being. Jung believed that this type of imbalance is a sign that the unconscious is seeking correction. The psyche, like a physical system, seeks a state of homeostasis where all parts are in harmony. Jung warned that one of the most common mistakes among those who have experienced a spiritual awakening is neglecting their material or emotional life in favor of their inner or spiritual life. This is an example of how imbalance can arise even on the path to enlightenment. Some individuals, upon beginning to explore the depths of their psyche, disconnect from their physical or emotional needs, believing that spirituality is the only thing that matters. However, Jung emphasized that spirituality without an anchor in everyday reality can be dangerous and may lead to dissociation from reality. To maintain psychic balance, Jung proposed that individuals should continuously work on integrating all parts of their being. This involves not only embracing the spiritual aspects of oneself, but also attending to the needs of the body, emotions, and relationships. Jung maintained that a healthy and balanced life requires a person to nurture all these areas equally. If one of these aspects is ignored, the imbalance will become evident in some way. A classic example that Jung used to illustrate the need for balance is the myth of Icarus. Icarus, flying too close to the sun with wings made of wax, ignored the natural limits of his being and succumbed to the fall. For Jung, this myth symbolizes the importance of maintaining a balance between the desire for spiritual elevation and the limitations imposed by our human nature. Those who try to fly too high on their spiritual path without respecting the boundaries of their physical and emotional being risk a catastrophic fall. Psychic balance also involves recognizing that not all stages of awakening are the same. Some individuals may experience moments of great growth and energy, while at other times it is necessary to withdraw, rest, and re-evaluate the path traveled. Jung pointed out that awakening is not a linear process. It often involves cycles of advancement and regression. Attempting to force continuous growth without respecting the natural cycles of the soul can lead to exhaustion and psychological collapse. Another crucial aspect of psychic balance is managing energy between introversion and extroversion. Jung highlighted that each person has a predisposition towards one of these two modes of being, but healthy development involves the ability to move between both states. Introversion, or focus on the inner world, is necessary for self-awareness and spiritual growth. But extroversion, or engagement with the outer world, is equally important for applying what has been learned and living in society. When a person becomes trapped in one of these poles, psychic imbalance arises. In conclusion, the principle of psychic balance is an essential law in spiritual and psychological awakening. Jung believed that for a person to evolve and reach a state of full individuation, they must learn to balance the various parts of their psyche. This involves not only recognizing the internal forces at play, but also paying attention to the external demands of the body, emotions, and relationships. The psyche constantly seeks a state of harmony, and the challenge of awakening is to learn to maintain that balance while navigating between light and darkness, the conscious and the unconscious, the spiritual and the material. One of the subtlest and most dangerous traps in the awakening process, according to Carl Jung, is the temptation to believe that the journey has come to an end. This is a dangerous illusion that arises when an individual, after achieving certain levels of self-understanding and internal transformation, believes they have already reached fullness or spiritual perfection. Jung warned that the process of individuation is endless, and any belief that a final state of enlightenment has been achieved is a form of self-deception. The journey toward total integration of the psyche, as conceived by Jung, is a continuous process that encompasses a lifetime. It has no concrete endpoint, as there are always new layers of the psyche to discover, new shadows to integrate, and new challenges to face. When someone believes they have reached the end of the road, they risk falling into complacency, and worse, halting their psychic growth. For Jung, the belief that one has arrived is itself a sign that internal work has been prematurely interrupted. One of the reasons why this temptation is so dangerous is that it can generate a sense of stagnation. People who believe they have achieved enlightenment may begin to dismiss any new information, experiences, or challenges that come their way, interpreting them as irrelevant or unnecessary. This creates a barrier between the individual and the ongoing learning process that is essential for spiritual and psychological growth. Jung described this phenomenon as a form of ego inflation, where the individual identifies so much with their awakening that they cannot see beyond their own self-image. The myth of Sisyphus is a powerful symbol of this temptation. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus was condemned to push a rock uphill only to watch it roll back down every time he reached the top. Jung saw this myth as a representation of the cyclical nature of the individuation process. There is always more work to be done, always new layers of the psyche that are revealed, and growth is never a linear or definitive process. Believing that one has reached the summit is a mistake that will inevitably lead to regression. Another manifestation of this temptation is the development of spiritual ego, where a person begins to see themselves as superior to others because they have reached certain levels of self-awareness or enlightenment. This type of ego is particularly dangerous because it is subtle. It masquerades as wisdom or virtue, but in reality, it is a form of spiritual stagnation. Jung observed that many individuals fall into this trap, believing they no longer need to question themselves or confront new shadows because they have already achieved it. The real danger of believing that the journey has ended is that one stops growing. Spiritual awakening, in its essence, is a process of continuous self-discovery, where each revelation opens the door to new questions, challenges, and opportunities for growth. Jung argued that the goal of individuation is not to reach a final state of perfection, but to live in a constant process of self-knowledge and transformation. Those who stop along their path lose this opportunity and risk becoming trapped in a rigid self-image. Instead of seeing awakening as a final destination, Jung suggested that it should be approached as an endless journey. Humility is key in this process, recognizing that there will always be more to learn, more shadows to integrate, and more to face is essential to avoid falling into the temptation of complacency. Jung emphasized that the true sage is one who knows that they never stop learning and that the process of personal growth is interminable. This attitude not only keeps the process of individuation ongoing, but also protects against the dangers of stagnation and self-indulgence. In conclusion, the ultimate temptation on the path of awakening is to believe that the journey has come to an end. This is a dangerous illusion that can lead to stagnation, ego inflation, and disconnection from the continuous process of individuation. Jung warned that true awakening has no final point. It is an endless cycle of discovery, growth, and integration. The challenge is to maintain an attitude of humility and openness, recognizing that there will always be new layers of the psyche to explore and new opportunities for evolution. According to Carl Jung, the dark law that the awakened should heed is one of balance and humility in their journey of awakening, whether it be spiritual or psychological. It's easy to fall into the traps of arrogance, spiritual ego, or projecting our own shadows onto others. Yet the true essence of individuation lies not in reaching a final state of enlightenment, but in embracing a continuous process of learning, growth, and equilibrium. Jung warned that one of the gravest errors an awakened individual can make is to believe they have transcended the fundamental laws that govern the human psyche. The unconscious is a vast and powerful realm, filled with mysteries that even the most enlightened can only begin to grasp. Violating the law of balance, whether by overly identifying with archetypes, neglecting the shadow, or assuming the journey is complete, can lead to psychic disintegration. Jung's key counsel for those who have awakened is straightforward. Cultivate a humble mindset, honor the formidable forces of the unconscious, and remain committed to your personal evolution. Awakening marks merely the beginning of the journey, not its conclusion.